Everyone. For those who don't know me, my name's Tom Sherring, part of the digital architecture team within ICT Services. So I look after Apple platforms across the department, both in the school and preschool environment, but also in corporate as well. Joining me today is Emily from Jamf. Emily is our customer success manager. Between the both of us, we will take you through some content today focused on shared iPad, so both its configuration and its use. So if you haven't had any exposure or experience with shared iPad, this will hopefully be enlightening and help you understand whether or not it has a practical implication at the site that you support. So Emily, I'll hand over to you if you'd like to do an intro and kick us off.
Yeah, no worries. So my name is Emily and I am the customer success for DFE South Australia at Jamf. And I'm here today to share with you some insights on shared iPad and how that can be used in your schools, some different ways that shared iPad could be configured, and ways that you might want to consider using that in different environments within the school. I have shared my screen. Tom, can you see that?
Coming through, Emily.
Yep. And is it changing?
It is transitioning, yep.
Excellent. All right. So today, let me just reconfigure my screens. Just a second. Yeah. So today we are looking at shared iPad. And it's a bit of a recap as we have presented on this previously. So shared iPad is something provided to us by Apple that allows multiple students or teachers to use a single iPad, but they still experience their own personalization and data storage on that iPad. To support shared iPad, iPads must be enrolled in MDM and managed through ADE. So we're already in a good situation with the DFE where most of our devices are in that situation already. To allow students to log into the iPad, the simplest method is via the managed Apple accounts, and Tom will go into how we've got that configured in the department a bit later on, giving the student a simplified login experience by selecting their icon and entering a passcode. So we've got no typing of full email addresses or passwords, making it really easy for the kids to log in. Once they are logged in to shared iPad, students' data will be cached on the device and stored in iCloud upon logout. With Jamf School, you can set the number of cached students per iPad, and this should be considered carefully based on the capacity of the iPad and whether the students will return to the same iPad, the number of apps available, and the number of students that will use that device per day. And we will dig a little bit deeper into that in a bit of time. So I am going to hand over to Tom now, who will talk through the way that DFE South Australia have the setup for supporting of our managed Apple accounts.
Thanks, Emily. So regarding the infrastructure for shared iPad, there is a bit more to consider than there is for a standard one-to-one device. So this takes into consideration schools that are using the Central Apple School Manager. So what that means is they've brought their devices into the Central Apple School Manager, either new devices that they've had vendor enrolled, existing devices that vendors have re-enrolled, or devices that have been manually enrolled into the Central Apple School Manager using Apple Configurator. So that is a key requirement, and using this federated managed Apple accounts that we've created. So going back almost a couple of years now, we undertook a process to federate the Central at Schools domain in the Central Apple School Manager, which means the Central Apple School Manager can have exclusive ability to create managed Apple IDs or managed Apple accounts as they're now known. So that those managed accounts, which in Apple School Manager provide 200 gigabytes of iCloud storage, can be used to facilitate on-device experiences like shared iPad and that log-on experience that Emily spoke about. Shared iPad will require the device to be set up either through automated device enrollment, so it's supervised. And then in terms of the devices and the software themselves, requires iPadOS 9.3 or higher. Hopefully all of the devices that are in use are running at least that, or 13.4 or higher for for temporary sessions or guest mode. But once again, they're quite older versions of iPadOS now, so hopefully all devices are running a more modern version. And as far as the hardware is concerned, runs on the devices on the screen there, so 5th gen or later, Air 2 or later, Mini 4th gen or later, or all iPad Pros. But a key consideration is, the storage capacity. So 32 gig or higher. Once again, most devices these days start at 64 gig, but there are still a number of devices out there that are 32 or 60, even 16 gig. So it won't be supported on those 16 gig devices, but even 32 gig devices, you'll see some potential challenges with in terms of managing that storage quota, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So in terms of logging in on shared iPad, so there's a couple of ways you can log in, right? If there's no passcode set, right, and I'll come back to setting passcodes in a sec, but the default authentication, similar to logging into the central Apple School Manager itself, is via EdPass. So because of that federation process that we've created with the @schools domain, with EdPass, that's what will prompt on the device when you go to log in the first time. Okay. A temporary shared iPad passcode can be set in Apple School Manager prior to log on. And this is something that's definitely recommended for student accounts who are going to be logging on, because typically students aren't going to have familiarity in a lot of cases, or most cases, with their @schools account and its associated password. So being able to create a shared iPad passcode in advance that's four digits, that's the standard complexity for student accounts, will just make that process a lot simpler. It is worth noting, however, that the passcodes set in Apple School Manager are temporary in nature only, so they're not permanent, not ongoing. So upon first login with the temporary passcode, students will be prompted to set up an ongoing password for ongoing use. And with teachers, so they will also log in. You can create a shared iPad passcode for a teacher account, a temporary one in Apple School Manager. However, it does have a greater complexity. It will be minimum 8 characters alphanumeric. And then once again, they can create their ongoing passcode for ongoing use. And passcodes can be reset using Apple Classroom or Apple School Manager. So that process or that requirement can be facilitated by the ICT or for teachers as well. So there's a couple of ways to manage that. And in terms of the infrastructure that I suppose supports and powers shared iPad functionality, some of you may have some knowledge of the integration and the partnership with Wand that DfE has introduced over the last sort of 12, 24 months. So EduSync Apple is a product that Wand offer, specifically EduSync Apple in the Apple context. So EduSync Apple is an integration which takes data from our central data systems. So in our case, the SED system, which is Central EdSAS Data Store, enabled for participating sites. That data is then aggregated. Thanks, Emily. I think there's a transition in this slide, so it might be a few clicks. Yep. That's right. So that data is then integrated, aggregated with data from other participating and enabled sites. And then from there, a recurring SFTP process to get that data into Apple School Manager is performed. And from there, that data gets mapped through to the corresponding location in Jamf School. So you can see there where it starts from. So school data systems. So my understanding is EMS and EdSAS feed into SEDS. But you can also integrate third-party systems as well. So if you use LMSs like Daymap and Central with timetabling softwares like Timetable or EdVal, Wand have a process to integrate this data into SEDS so that it can be synced through to Apple School Manager and Jamf School. So if that's something you're interested in, that'd be one to perhaps contact me separately on, and I can talk you through the process to explore that. So introduced in December 2023, this process is now enabled for over 330 schools and allows for seamless integration and syncing of user and class data that facilitates on-device experiences such as shared iPad.
All right. So as we kind of touched on a little bit, there are a few things that we should think about when we are planning our shared iPad rollout, particularly on that storage side of things. So Before we consider how many users can sign into a shared iPad, we first must make sure it's configured with all the apps and documents you require, so you can view how much storage space remains for the users. So when we're considering this, we need to consider all of the classes and the apps that are required for those classes, that they need to be all fitting onto the iPad all of the time. Shared iPad will customize the experience for the class as to what apps they want to have available, but all it's doing is hiding apps. They all still reside on the iPad all of the time. So we need to make sure that we consider how much apps and media that we need to have available for all the classes that will appear on that shared iPad. So devices with a storage capacity of 32 gig, so 10 gig will be used for the system, 8 gig for the apps and media, and the remaining storage is divided among the number of defined users. So with 1 gig minimum per user. So we should consider that, devices with a storage capacity of 64 gig or greater, we once again have that 10 gig, but we have 16 gig available for apps and media and a minimum of 2 gigabytes per user. There are some apps that are optimized for shared iPad. So you can see that in the App Store, and we'll have a look at where that's viewable in a moment. These apps save their user-generated content into iCloud, and that makes it easier to access on other shared iPads. All right. So when an iPad is being used in the shared iPad mode, we have some options that are available to us to configure on how the user data is stored on those devices. So within Jamf School, we have the default users and storage, and this is where the iPad calculates the optimal number of users, up to 10 users, and the storage is allocated to each user based on the storage capacity of the device. We wouldn't necessarily recommend this as an ideal way. Resident users allows you to set a maximum number of users that can log into the iPad, and once that maximum is reached, no other users can log into the device until they're wiped or they are logged out. And the storage quota allows you to set the maximum amount based on the storage of each user instead. So this is where we are thinking back to our storage allocation and planning, and it's important to understand the amount of storage used by our apps and consider how many students might be logging into a device per day. Remembering the experience is most optimized when a user can be allocated to the same device so that they are loading their cached content and not having to wait for their content to download from iCloud each time they use a new device. When we're keeping the storage requirements in mind, this setting lives inside the ADE profile. So you may need to have multiple ADE profiles depending on the different capacity across your iPads. So if you might need to have one for a 32 gig iPad or a 64 gig iPad set of iPads. Using different profiles there will help you manage how many users can log in on those each one. So this is where we see the optimized for shared iPads. So there are no restrictions on what apps you can use in shared iPad, but there are some apps that would work better. So choosing those apps that are tagged as optimized for shared iPad in the App Store will ensure a more friendly user experience. And the apps are optimized for shared iPad will sync their data in iCloud on logout, so that the next time the student log in to a different iPad, all their work will be available to them. So if we are considering that we are downloading our content from iCloud, something that Apple offers to us is content caching that can be configured in your environment on any Mac OS system. Mac Minis are perfect for this sort of content caching. Not only can the content cache be used for iCloud data, but it can also be used for bringing down OS updates and App Store updates. So the content cache works by it living locally on your network, and instead of going out to Apple and downloading that data, it will go to the content cache. So you're saving your internet traffic and giving a better experience for your users. So now we're going to have a look at the 3 different options for deploying shared iPad. So we have 3 different ways. So we have touched on the class-based option that we've been talking about here with our managed Apple accounts and the students just selecting their picture from the device. And this is the most personalized experience and is ideal for our student environment. The students still get their customized apps, and you can apply restrictions per class as well. The other option is Apple account login, where students or teachers are required to log in with their managed Apple account by typing in the full email address and entering their PIN code. So this just means that we haven't actually allocated a class to an iPad. They would just be presented with logging in to their iPad, and they would use their full EdPass email address and password. And all of the apps would be available to them. There wouldn't be any customization on showing which apps are available for which class. And the final option that we've got there is temporary session or guest mode. In this mode, there's no user authentication required. And there's also no session data saved. So this is an ideal scenario for perhaps where you're handing out iPads in the library just for filling out a form or something like that, or web browsing, where no user information needs to be saved and we don't need to customize the experience based on which user. So as I said, the class-based login would be the most common use case for students. It's making it really simple for them to log in. You can customize it with the pictures, or they will have their initials. They simply select their icon, enter that temporary passcode for the first time if that's been set, and then they can set their own passcode. As Tom touched on, if students do forget their passcode, it can be reset in ASM or via Apple Classroom. And the apps can be customized per class, and the students will only see their own data when they log in and select their profile on the device. So upon logout, the student data will be synced to iCloud. So if they do happen to log into another iPad, they will be able to access that data again. So the next option there is the Apple account login. So this is what that screen would look like. They would be entering their full email address or their EdPass email address in here and prompted for their password. Anyone can sign into the device, as there is no class data locking down who can access what iPad. There's no customization of apps that are available, so all users will see all apps in this mode. If users are logging into a different iPad each time, then their data is being downloaded from iCloud each time. So we do see a bit of a slower experience because they're needing to wait for that data to come down. If users are returning to the same iPad, they will see down in the left-hand corner the recent users, and you can select, and then they can select their profile from here. However, there's no pictures and no option for enabling guest mode. So they will be signed in via their managed Apple account, and their iCloud data will be available with this recent user option. So this might be used if you've got a relief teacher that's coming onto the campus and they need to grab an iPad from the library or from the administration staff, and they would be returning back to the iPad, and they can just select that recent users and get their data back again. So the next option that we have is the temporary sessions. So it is only available in iPadOS 14.5 and greater. And it can be set in the ADE profile to only allow the temporary sessions. So if you had a set of iPads that you only wanted temporary sessions available on them, you can restrict them so that the shared iPad mode is always temporary session mode. There is an auto log out option that can be set, so a timeout, so it will automatically log the user out. There's no customization of the apps that are available, so all users will all see all apps, and as there is not any user information collected, none of the data is synced to iCloud, and all user data is deleted at logout. So what we might do, no, not yet. So to enable shared iPad, as we've said, devices must be enrolled via ADE. If devices are already in use, it's not possible to turn them into shared iPads without erasing and re-enrolling them, except for the caveat of the temporary access mode. So you can add a device that is already enrolled to a class that has shared iPad and as a shared iPad, and you can allow the temporary sessions without it being erased. So in our ADE profile, we would tick the enable shared iPad, and we get a number of different options here. Tom has kindly created you lots of templates of your ADE profiles within the instance already, and he has a shared iPad one in there that you can copy and modify to meet your school's requirements. So here we can configure the idle timeout for logging out users automatically, and it can be configured independently of the temporary sessions or managed users. And here, this is where you would also set your options for your storage configuration and how many users. So we would recommend using the resident users and selecting how many users that you would allow for, how many users you expect to log in on a daily basis +1. So how many unique users +1 per day. So as I've touched on before, we want to consider what the sum of all the apps for all the classes will be on our iPads, and all apps will need to be scoped to your device groups for your shared iPads. Users will not be able to customize their home screen layout, but an administrator can do that, and we'll have a look at that in the Jamf School console in a minute. All right, so here we have, we might just pop over to the profiles. And here is one of Tom's templates for you. And on the iOS settings, we can see here we've got the enable shared iPad, and that pops out this section down here where we configure what we want to use. And this is the primary thing that we want to look at here, is that storage configuration and setting that to resident users, and then making a decision based on our size of our iPad and the number of apps that we've got and the number of users that we think will be available. Now, this managed Apple ID that hasn't been updated to Apple accounts default domains is for when we're using the login via the EdPass email address option. This will pre-populate into the keyboard so that you only have to type in the first part and not have to worry about retyping in the domain. The user can select that domain from the drop-down box in the keyboard. So where we configure our shared iPad once we've done our enrolment and we've got them enrolled is we create our classes, which are coming across from your Apple School Manager, and we can click through into our class here, and we've already added the iPads into here under the shared iPads. But if you didn't have a shared iPad in here, you would see a button that said add shared iPads. So at the moment, that's using a group, using a smart group or some smart group filter criteria to pull those iPads in where is shared iPad is equaling yes. So from here, we can configure what the experience is for this Jamf School training class. From here, we can add our apps. So we get a nice UI to see exactly what the kids are going to see, and we can drag across and add our apps in here. We can also add our web clips, and this is a little bit different from what you might be doing when you're managing an individual one-to-one iPad. The web clips are actually configured in here by clicking an add new web clip, and we give it a label as we would in normally and the URL that we want it to go to. So we don't create it through our profiles, we're creating it here in inside the shared iPad settings. Now these are also, you can drag them around, so you can fully customize this as to how the teacher would like their class to look, and continue adding as many apps as you wish. So we might add that, and then we can also add any documents that are available, but we can also configure some restrictions at the class level. So there, it's not the full set of restrictions, but we do have quite a number of things that we can set here that you would normally see in the restrictions payload, but this will be at the per class level. We also have the options to configure Google account and Exchange if you wish to. So we can, once we've made those changes, we can click Save. And that is pretty much all we need to do for configuring what's in the class, what's going to appear on the iPads, and how we get into shared iPad mode. What we might have a look is, while we're in this Jamf School instance, is having a look at what additional options we get available to us in the inventory when a device is a shared iPad. So if we pop into here, we can see that we get a shared users option here. And we can see here that Tom has logged in to this iPad recently, and that he's done his profile has no data to sync up to iCloud at the moment. And this is the size of his quota. So this could be useful as an area to review if you're finding that your students are having to re-download from iCloud too much. You'll be able to see here just how many users are using the device, and whether the amount of data that they're using is just quite exceeding the capacity of the iPad. We can also see here the login history of who's logged into this iPad recently. And we also have the option to log off someone from a shared iPad. So perhaps if it hasn't met the timeout time and you need to log someone out of shared iPad to free up some space for someone else to log in, or to open a session so that someone else can log in, you can remotely log them off here. It's also available as a bulk action from the full inventory screen. So if you had a whole class of iPads that hadn't logged out, or multiple iPads, you could select them from this screen once it loads. And from the More option, you can select Log Off User, where you can have multiple devices. One thing to be aware of with shared iPads is that the users cannot do OS updates. That's not available to them as a user. You can only send them from MDM, and no one can be logged in at the time when the OS update applies. So that the device needs to be not being used for that OS update to be applied. So that's what we've just covered off through there, where we just went and viewed all that in the Jamf School instance. So now I am going to pass it over to Tom.
So it's just a quick demo video I put together earlier today. Didn't go with a live demo. I think when we facilitated this presentation last year, I think we had some challenges with the live demo in Teams. So quick demo video, but it'll give you an idea of how shared iPad looks and works on device. So that option gives you the option to sign in with your managed Apple account. And this option would be replicable of what a student would experience. Signing in, putting in a passcode, which would generally be temporary in nature if it's been set through Apple School Manager. That is the extent of the video. Unfortunately, the next step, once you log in, you'll go through some setup screens. Unfortunately, the video recording wouldn't proceed past that point. It disconnects and doesn't reconnect, so apologies. Can't show that to you, but what a user would experience beyond this point is going through some initial setup screens. So like how you would on a one-to-one device, so you'd set language, region, you'd then go and reset that temporary passcode to an ongoing passcode, and then you'd also set location services as well to enable that, and then from there you'd be taken to the home screen. So that just gives you a very brief intro into what shared iPad would look like on device. And if I jump back to the section where you sign in with your managed Apple ID, I'll just pause there. It's not configured in this example, but the part where Emily took us through the ADE profile configuration, where you can configure the domain, that would appear at the top of the on-screen keyboard, so just above the top row there, and you'd be able to put in your username, so first.last123, and then tap on that domain, and it would pre-fill it for you, so thus saving you having to enter the full email. But yeah, from there, I think we can move on, Emily.
Yeah, I think the next is Q&A.